Welcome to All Business No Boundaries, a collection of supply chain stories by DHL Supply Chain, the North American leader in contract logistics. I'm your host, Will Haywood. This is a place for in-depth discussions on the supply chain challenges keeping you up at night. We're breaking beyond the boundaries that are limiting your supply chain. Today's episode is From Vision to Reality, the Honeypot's Path to Expansion. Our guests are Michelle Lapino, Chief Operating Officer from the Honeypot, and Meagan Cimino, Senior Director of Business Development at DHL Supply Chain. Let's dive in. Okay, well, welcome to you both. I've really been looking forward to this episode. We'll start today as we always do, and I'll ask you each to introduce yourself, your name, your title, and the company that you work for. Michelle, you're our guest, so you get to go first.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm Michelle Lapino. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Honeypot Company.
Okay, and Meagan.
Thanks, Will. I'm Meagan Cimino, Senior Director of Business Development with DHL Supply Chain.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for being here. I know we had a preliminary prep call before this episode, and we've got some great material to cover. I want to start, though, with you, Michelle. A lot of people know the Honeypot, and a lot of people don't. So I wondered if you could kind of give us an overview of what the company does in its product line.
Yeah, certainly. So the Honeypot Company was the first Better For You feminine hygiene company. We were looking at basically holistic feminine wellness. We were established in 2014. And we have some great accolades to our name. We are the number 3 fastest growing feminine hygiene company in the United States. And our sensitive wash is the number 1 feminine wash on the marketplace.
Terrific. And your products are available in where? What stores or online or?
Yeah, we're available in multiple areas. So you can find us in Target, Walmart, Amazon. We have our own website, grocery, pretty much anywhere where you shop, you can find our products.
So a relatively young company, fast growing. Can you take us through sort of how we got here today, DHL and the Honeypot together? What was happening in your business that gave us the opportunity to start to work together?
Yeah, so our company really experienced some rapid growth. I would say between the years of 2019, 2020, we went from being around about 10 million in net sales and grew to just under 70 million in net sales. So some really, really rapid growth. The business was founded years before, but there's a lot of legwork and a lot of groundwork that takes to seed a company. And at that point, we launched in Target, and the pandemic hit, and the company was really looking to get as much available product out into the marketplace and to support our customers as possible. As you can imagine, it was times were hard. We had to make some hard choices. We had to turn off our own e-commerce site to be able to support the retailers that we'd invested in. And we were reaching in kind of 2021, kind of that phase where we've grown very, very rapidly. We've moved from maybe 6 people to about 30 people in the organization. And we had some choices to make. We brought on vendors early on in our relationship that had got us 6 million, 30 million. And then we needed to establish whether or not those same vendors were the vendors that were going to be able to take us into the future. Were they the right people to help us with that next 100 million and then beyond? So from a operations perspective, my job was really to vet end to end the entire supply chain. What did we have? What didn't we have that we needed? Were the players that we were working with at the time the right partners to take us to the next phase? Everyone that we've worked with, we're obviously ultimately grateful, but the people that serve you well in those first few years are not necessarily the same people as you continue to grow and scale that are in the position to support you ongoing. And I think that's where the relationship really with DHL came around. We established our current logistics footprint was not working for us. We didn't feel it was scalable, and we didn't feel we'd be able to support the growth that we were projecting for the company. I remember at the time we were bringing on new customers, and I was very nervous to say yes, because I was making choices of, do I ship a new customer order or do I support my existing business? And obviously that's a bottleneck and not sustainable. And, we ran a refer to quote process, and DHL were in the mix and were ultimately successful.
So Meagan, from your chair, how did you get connected to Honey Pot, and what was it like from the DHL side?
Yeah, so Michelle reached out in early 2022, and we began conversations around what might a partnership between DHL and the Honey Pot look like. We are fortunate that we had a prior relationship with Michelle at her former employer. And, based on that relationship and our partnership, she thought of us for the Honey Pot. As she mentioned, they needed to make a change, and she was really looking to pick a partner for the future. And so we began working together ahead of any type of formal bid or RFP, but looking at their network, analyzing their network, and running different scenarios. Ultimately, we landed on a single site dedicated distribution center model located in Memphis, Tennessee. And so that work really took us through the better part of 2022 for ultimately our go live in 2023.
So Michelle, Meagan referenced that you had known DHL before, and I know you have an interesting career story, and I want to ask you a little bit about that. First of all, from your accent, I can tell you're not from the U.S. But
this is my best Texan accent.
you've worked for some interesting brands, and I wonder if you could sort of tell us about that history. But then what got you to a startup high growth brand like the Honey Pot?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to share. So I think my venture or my roads into supply chain, they weren't really planned. It was really accidental. I graduated university like a lot of enthusiastic young individuals. I thought I'd hit the streets and I'd land my dream job. And I was working in an insurance company. So not exactly the path that you imagine for yourself. And I was lucky enough that the hometown I grew up in England was actually a manufacturing site for Nestle. And I had a friend working there. They recommended me for a role, actually working in their customer service team. I was lucky enough to get the job. And that was really my first experience of, working closely in, operations in an FMCG business, and really opened my eyes up in terms of the roles that were out there and the things that were available. I think pretty quickly, I knew I wanted a career in planning. I was sat in my, I would say, heart of the business role between like sales and operations, working really closely with the planning teams. And it just really resonated with me. I didn't stay long at Nestle. I actually moved to Unilever after about a year, and I spent the next 15 years there. I didn't expect to spend all that time there, but it was a really, really rich learning environment for me. I worked in the UK personal care business, various roles across planning. I did some demand planning, some supply planning, innovation, and then really moved into S&OP, so like holistic business planning, working with all departments and all areas of the business. So not just in the personal care space, but actually working with foods, refreshments. And that for me was really a catalyst to where I am today. It opened up opportunities for me to be able to take on S&OP leadership roles in smaller acquisition businesses. Unilever's not just out there growing their, core business. They're also growing through acquisition and acquiring smaller and independently led businesses. And that brought me over to the US. I accepted a job in Dallas, sight unseen, turned up at what was TG, the brand that they're really famous for is the bedhead brand. And my job was to take like a Unilever S&OP light process into that business. So when they were reporting, everything kind of rolled up in the same way, but it was size appropriate for the business. And that really led from being a kind of 1-2 year opportunity to a permanent move to me to the US. I've been here ever since. I spent 4 years there before moving on to lead supply chain at Living Proof, another acquisition business, and the business that Meagan kind of referred to earlier when we were talking about my previous experience with DHL. We actually stood up a facility in Ohio for the Living Proof team during COVID.
So Meagan, I know in our business at DHL, particularly with consumer packaged goods companies, we tend to serve larger enterprises. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about maybe starting with Living Proof, but certainly with Honey Pot. What are the similarities and differences between a fast growth, smaller company and what we do with some of our larger clients?
Sure. So many of the challenges are the same. I'll start with the similarities. Operational excellence, vendor compliance, delivering on time and in full, continuing to look at reducing cost to serve, how to grow, shelf space for our partners. All of those objectives are common amongst our customer base, including our larger customers. Some unique elements I think that Michelle and I and our teams worked on and uncovered as we were forming our partnership was the Honey Pot was actually growing and beginning their relationship in a number of these markets and with a number of these large retail partners that she mentioned. So while our larger customers have established presences in store and with these partners like the Targets and the Walmarts of the world, the Honey Pot as a disruptive and emerging brand was in the earlier stages of their relationship. So performance and operational excellence was that much more critical. Stockouts are a common nightmare across our customer base, but for a emerging brand continuing to break into these customers, it can really change the trajectory of that relationship. So we focused very early on operational excellence, on inventory accuracy and visibility, and really leveraging all of the experience that DHL has across our customer base and applying those best practices and lessons to help the Honey Pot with their growth journey.
I wondered if we could spend a minute on just the challenges of serving the retail channels. I mean, these are fairly demanding partners who are used to a certain standard of operations. Michelle, you've got a lot of history with them. What are some of the things that they expect that you have to be able to do as a supplier into them?
Yeah, I think when you're launching into retail, especially some of the big players, you're making a commitment, and you're making a commitment that you're going to continue to serve their products under their terms and conditions, on full, on time. And when you're unable to do that, there's penalties. And those penalties for small businesses can be pretty brutal. I think when I first entered the organization, we were 7 figures in non-compliance. We were using a 3P network. We had grown very rapidly. We were using 2 different providers to meet 2 different customer needs, one in consolidation and one serving kind of our other customers and our own e-com channel. And we kind of put our product in there. We'd not really established any ways of working. We were part of multi-client facilities. they knew more than we did in terms of what this world looked like and how to serve. So they were running our business from a logistics perspective, kind of using their playbook and their T's and C's. And, what we found, especially when we consolidated everything and brought it to our site in Memphis with DHL, that they were running our business in two very different ways. We were bringing product in that even had different dimensional data in terms of tie highs, like just foundational things, like being able to receive something in, put it away and know what you have, really exposed some of the issues we'd been feeling and not really understanding why they were happening. It's things like this are a bit of a leaky bucket. They're inefficient. They don't help you build and scale a business. And, that's money a young business that wants to make a dent should be spending on things like sales and marketing. It should be acquiring new doors. It should be driving new business. And that's not where that money ends up being spent. It ends up being spent, funding retailer non-compliance, which doesn't help an organization grow. And I just think for me, this is why operations can be so transformative for growing and scaling businesses. People spend most of their time on sales and marketing, but actually having a firm and solid foundation is critical to then make sure that you're being a good custodian of that cash and the profit that you're generating and able to redeploy it into the business in the right way.
Yeah, so Meagan, to put a fine point on it, I mean, can you dimension the size of some of these penalties in dollar terms?
I think Michelle mentioned, right, 7 figures was what she came to us and the challenge that DHL Supply Chain was faced with, right? And how could we work together to reduce those? And I think we can confidently say that, we have taken a solid 6 figures out of those chargebacks. And that's across both the warehousing and distribution element, along with transportation. So she mentioned OTIF, along with vendor compliance. We've been able to make meaningful strides in both of those buckets to help reduce the chargebacks. And I think the other point that I would build on, Michelle, is, you've talked about the hard costs, and certainly that's top of mind. There is also the noise that the honeypot was experiencing. So I know we had a lot of conversations around, at that point in time, it almost felt like you were playing defense with some of your customer partners, right? Based upon all of that chargeback noise and having to constantly research and present evidence and defend or fight back. We've been able to partner together to not only reduce the hard costs, but also reduce that noise, like you said, so that the honeypot can shift their efforts and focus onto growth and the sales and marketing voice.
Terrific. And just for our listeners, OTIF stands for?
On time, in full.
And what does that mean?
Well, that means that those are compliance requirements, and each retail partner has a slightly different definition and take on what on time and in full means. But at a very high level, it is requirements around shipping on time, delivering on time, and the product being received, the order in full. So complete and packaged according to that retail partner's specifications.
Yeah, I know that's part of your everyday parlance, but not for those kind of walking the streets out there. So it starts in Memphis in the DC, and I think there's been some evolution or maybe growth in the relationship. Michelle, what other things are you working on with Meagan and her team?
So as we mentioned, we started with the DC, the 4 walls. We also were then able to identify some other areas where we were maybe suboptimal in terms of efficiencies and a hard cost. So I think the next project that we actually looked at was the packaging project. So bringing our display building in-house. So this had been a process previously where we'd pick up all of our product, we'd take it to a secondary site. They would build the corrugate, they would fill these displays, and they would ship them on our behalf. That project was really about doing that work within our own four walls in our building. It actually allowed us to take around 4 to 6 weeks out of the process because we weren't picking up product, shipping it to another location, receiving it in, building, and then having to send out the displays to our customers. We're able to do that all through our normal order drop process. It was really beneficial for my team in terms of being able to take the materials that were already in the building to the other side of the building, build the displays out, and then receive normal orders, send the displays out, consolidated with our regular weekly orders, and just allow the orders to run through like their normal like pick, pack, ship process. Previously, we were having to really manually create things like case labels for displays that we're shipping out to our customers because the sites we were using weren't familiar with like these. It's part of the compliance process, but basically readying the product in a way that was ready according to our retailer guidelines.
So packaging, are there other activities as well, Megan?
Then next one, we went into domestic outbound, Megan.
Yes. Yes. So in addition to the displays and packaging work that Michelle just mentioned, there was also an opportunity to partner on outbound transportation. And again, managing that final mile delivery from DC into the Honey Pot's retail customers. And so we began that work last year. And, have had a successful partnership thus far. But again, with the objectives of continuing to add value, reduce complexity. I think, Michelle, we always joke about you now have one throat to choke, if you will. But DHL is really working both, with our DC and our transportation teams. We work together on a daily basis to ensure that orders are flowing through the warehouse and getting shipped and delivered on time. And we are managing that process end to end for the Honey Pot. So it's been a fantastic partnership, and one that we're continuing to look for ways to optimize.
The flip side of the one throat to choke is all the eggs in one basket. Michelle, did you have misgivings about that?
I think every time we've looked at extensions to the business, we've actually run a formal quote process. So we've not just said, hey, we're with DHL, let's do this process. We have extended that to multiple parties. And then we've really looked to see, what each of them offer from a cost perspective, but then also like the efficiencies and how they help and aid the team. And I think, where DHL have really stood out is the ability to give us visibility into what's happening for us where needed to be self-service in terms of information, but then also having that support if we need to. We get a chargeback through from a retailer, we're able to kind of pick up the phone, we're able to make sure that what we think was happening actually happened, get the documentation, and then submit that. So it's really drove efficiencies for our team because my supply chain's really been a one-stop shop for all of that information. So I think that's been incredibly important. And then the one thing I really like about how DHL shows up is like the systemic nature of the integrations. So I think, you can have a phenomenal partner, but if all the knowledge in that organization is kind of learnt, you could have someone that is the linchpin who has all the knowledge in their head. They're doing a fabulous job. They're running a great facility. You promote them. They go on to better things. All of a sudden, the building stops working. What you're expecting to happen stops and you don't really understand why. And then you realize like the system wasn't driving the work. It was an individual. And again, not sustainable. So for me, the fact that things are hooked up systemically and, we follow our playbook, it does what it's meant to do. It goes down to the facility. Like, I expect that pick, pack, ship to happen the same every time, no matter who is, the person ultimately at the end of the line, executing against that order. And I think for me, there's confidence there. And, like all good partnerships, as well as, the great relationship, we have the contracts in place and the KPIs in place to work together to make sure that you guys are delivering to the expectations that we agreed to and we both outlined.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Although I think we both can agree that Meagan is irreplaceable in the situation.
This is my favorite part of the podcast.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Michelle, in a high growth company, founder led, I know you've had a lot of fun things that have happened over the years. We had talked about an advertisement that went on TV, and I wondered if you could share that with our listeners, kind of what led up to that and what it ultimately wound up being, which I think was kind of a surprise to you.
Yeah, I think early on in relationship with Target, we just got our listings. Our founder had gone to record what we thought was going to be some in-store video, and it turned out that it was going to be an ad during the Super Bowl. And on the back of that, we saw extremely high demand for the product. It was the same year that the pandemic hit. So, from our perspective, we really appreciate the support of our community and them coming out and buying all the stock that was available. But that led to a case where, we source not just domestically here in the US, but internationally. So we were having to pull products in obviously an extremely volatile supply chain situation where no one really had seen anything like this before in their lifetime. And, we got a lot of retailer interest, from other retailers reaching out, wanting, to do business with us. And, that was when I kind of referenced earlier the fact that we had to cut off our own e-com business. That's where we really had to double down and make a hard decision. And we didn't go forward and move forward with taking on additional business. We basically turned off our own e-commerce channel, and we prioritized all the stock that we could source and all the stock that was available into those customer footprints that we had. Again, relating back to chargebacks, you've got to make sure that you're serving the business you have before you go out and expand into new areas. And I think for a team that had been grinding away for years, trying to, get the company into a position where it was available everywhere people shopped, it feels really counterintuitive to take that step back and say, we're going to pause. We're going to make sure that we're supporting what we have before we move forward. And, the business made that decision. And I think that was really one of, for us, like those defining points where it's like, how are we going to run this business? How are we going to move this business forward? And we really realized that, we needed to get the foundational parts of our operational business correct before we could go out there in the marketplace and, like, as I say, sell. So, I think very pivotal in the way the Honeypot views operations and the importance it puts on the operations. And I think it's atypical for businesses to thinking that way.
Yeah, great points all. And proves that Super Bowl ads do in fact work.
Someone's watching them, yeah.
Yes. And even better when your partner is paying for them, right? So Meagan, where do you see things going next between DHL and the Honeypot?
Well, we want to continue to support the Honeypot on their rocket ship growth journey. It's so exciting and rewarding to be a part of what we call a rising star company, and their growth. So the Honeypot has plans to continue to expand within region, with their current partners, along with bringing on new retailers. Again, part of, our partnership is really leveraging DHL's experience. with these customers to help the honeypot with these relationships. Also entering new markets. So thinking about globally, the honeypot does have plans to expand beyond the US and has already started that journey. DHL will be hand in hand with them to help support entering new markets, along with growing in North America.
Yeah. And so, Michelle, what do you see as the keys to success in the years ahead for you?
I think, we've already, expanded operations with DHL in a number of areas. For me, I think we're nearly 3 years into the relationship now. We're doing a lot around continuous improvement. The team continue to help us to see if there's different ways of doing things. Meagan and the team just recently assessed whether a stretch automation was one of the right things to do for the facility. We bring in product that's floor loaded. Obviously, that's a lot of work. So we were, running the numbers and the volumes to see if that made sense. And, we found that for the facility and the volume throughput that we have today, we're not in that space right now. But I think these are like constant conversations that we're having in terms of how can we find and eke out efficiencies. And as we continue to grow, I think our expectation is that we grow together. And, as we build the business, we're working with a partner that not just has, capabilities within our building and our four walls, but if we're asking about things that, might not be familiar in region, it's very likely that someone somewhere globally is doing this, and we can kind of pull on that knowledge and continue to utilize, these global experts with deep functional expertise as a really, really rich source to help us continue to grow in the most optimum way.
Well, this has been really interesting to hear how you guys have achieved such success together. And I wish you the best of luck in the months and years ahead. Keep that growth trajectory going at the honeypot, and hopefully Meagan can keep the team supporting that and doing everything that you need from a provider.
Yeah, we appreciate the support.
And thank you for joining the podcast today. And I hope that we can cross paths again in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you both. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate us and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also re-listen to our entire library of episodes on our website, dhl.com/ABNB podcast. See you next time.